What's up, guys? So, not exactly nightmare matchups, but I was thinking about with the all-time great fighters, like who would have been their toughest fights, like the most competitive fights, and which fighters could have beaten them. And so we look at fighters like Jon Jones and George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, Khabib, Dominick Cruz in his prime, like various other all-time greats, Demetrius Johnson. Which fighters could have beaten them that they never fought? And for the first one, I guess the best fighter to talk about is arguably the greatest fighter of all time to most fans, Jon Jones. Which fighters could have beaten Jon Jones? I can think of 8 fighters that could have beaten him, not that they would 100%, but they had a shot at beating him. And so far, technically, in a way, undefeated if you don't count the disqualification to Matt Hamill, but we all did see him get beaten by Dominick Reyes, and even a lot of people believe that Alexander Gustafsson defeated Jon Jones as well. Well, he's been looking as one of the most dominant fighters in UFC history. And it's interesting to look back at some of the opponents that he hasn't gone up against that could have given him a difficult fight. So here are my opinionated 9 fighters that could have beaten Jon Jones, ranked from the least likely to beat him to the most likely to beat him. But I think all of these fighters had a chance, not that they definitively would, but they absolutely had a chance in beating him. Starting with number 8, I would say heavyweight Daniel Cormier, who is in my opinion, a better fighter than light heavyweight Daniel Cormier. The reason why he went down to light heavyweight is because he didn't want to fight his friend Cain Velasquez, as Cain was the champion in the heavyweight division, therefore he moved down. But make no mistake, DC in heavyweight was way more dangerous, actually had knockout power, wasn't cutting all of that weight, and had so much natural strength to be able to lift heavyweights and slam them with ease. His wrestling was more effective, his boxing was more effective, and he was also incredibly fast for a heavyweight. He's one of the few fighters who had the same speed in 2 different weight classes. He was the same speed at heavyweight as he was at light heavyweight. He had the kind of wrestling skills to contest with Jon Jones, just like we saw in the light heavyweight division, while also having more power in his hands. I think that fight would have been a lot more competitive, and DC could have found maybe a decision win, potentially. Not 100%, but he definitely had a shot at doing so. Heavyweight Daniel Cormier would have been a very good fight for Jon Jones. The reason why Jon Jones could have also beaten him as well is because we saw technically how they match up against each other. The body shots from Jones, the kicks to the knee, the kicks up high, all that stuff is still going to be there, because even though Daniel Cormier is at heavyweight, his techniques are still the same. He still fights the same. He just has more strength and power in everything he does, while carrying the same amount of speed and also having good cardio. So it pretty much would have just been a much better version of Daniel Cormier than the one that Jon Jones fought at light heavyweight. Then number 7, I would say prime Stipe Miocic. Now, it seems kind of strange because Jones just beat Stipe, right? We just saw him TKO him with a body kick. But that was an old Stipe, out of his prime, 1 foot out the door, hadn't fought in 3.5 years. He was clearly not the same fighter. He was very, very slow in there. Stipe in his prime had fast hands, both offensively, moving forward, and even moving backwards. Just like we saw against Fabrice Verdum and Roy Nelson and many other fighters he fought. He also had good wrestling, very good striking defense. It wouldn't have been completely outsped with the way that he actually fought Jones. So the boxing would have been there. And also this version of Stipe won a round against Jon Jones. Can you imagine a prime Stipe Miocic? That fight would have been a lot more competitive. He has the boxing, which is far better than Jones. Great combinations, good body shots. The way that Jones could have beaten Stipe, he could have gotten takedowns, of course. The kicks are still going to be an advantage for him. His reach still would have been kind of an issue for Stipe as well, because Stipe wasn't the best with like switching stances in the midst of his combination and getting close, the way, for example, Dominick Reyes did, or other fighters potentially could have done as well. And the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu difference between Stipe and Jones would have been vast, right? But I do think that Stipe had a good shot at beating Jon Jones if they were both in their prime. And then we go to Alexander Gustafsson, did beat Jon Jones, and that's pretty much where it comes down to, right? He had a very close fight with Jones. He was able to mostly outbox him, even it out with the wrestling, but Jones had the kicks, the elbows, and knees in order to make it competitive with Alexander Gustafsson. Their reach were very close, so Alexander Gustafsson, as we've seen, could have beaten Jon Jones. Now, people will say, what about the rematch? It wasn't the same Gustafsson. Now, that's not to say that Gustafsson would 100% beat Jon Jones, but we did see him get very close to doing so. Then we go to Dominick Reyes, who's a fighter that absolutely beat Jones, and in hindsight, had a very good style to fight Jones, a fighter who was extremely athletic, fast, hit hard with the left hand and the left kick, great takedown defense, good ability to get up from the bottom. Jones could not hold this guy down. And the thing that put him ahead of everybody else that Jones fought was mostly the footwork. Able to switch stances, stances and pivot, redirect with his movements, which got him past Jon Jones' reach, landing shots on him, which is something that most fighters were not able to do against Jon Jones. So if there is any arguable loss of Jon Jones' career, it was the fight to Dominick Reyes. And from there, we go to the heavyweight division because there's not a lot of light heavyweights that could beat him. Most of them are going to be in the heavyweight division, of course. Alistair Overeem, roid on roid action. Now, some of you might be thinking, how can Alistair Overeem beat Jon Jones? Alistair of all fighters? Well, styles make fights. And Alistair Overeem had some of the best takedown defense. He was much bigger than Jones, hit way harder, and very fast for a heavyweight, while also being the better striker of the two. Generally looking at the fight, if Jon Jones cannot confidently get Alistair Overeem to the ground and he had to strike with Overeem, the fight is over. There's no way Jon Jones can strike with Overeem. The kicks to the leg would have been devastating. He was so precise with his punches, kicks, and knees. He also had a long reach, excellent in the clinch. One of the few fighters that can actually fight Jon Jones in the clinch. One of the best things about Jones' abilities is the clinch work. He can trip you from there, land knees, elbows, all sort of stuff. Alistair Overeem is one of the few fighters that can actually match him, if not even overpower him in moments in the clinch. And fun fact, they did train together. Jon Jones got injured one time in his career before the whole Stipe thing, and that was because he was training with Alistair Overeem. Back in 2014, Alistair Overeem shot a takedown on Jon Jones in the training room that injured Jones. They said that Jones stepped the wrong way, something snapped, and Overeem wasn't as big back then. They said that Overeem was 240 pounds, where Jon Jones was 220 pounds. We're talking about Alistair Overeem here, who is 265 pounds, while also being nearly just as fast as when he was 240. The only thing lacking on Alistair Overeem was a chin. Right, he wasn't able to take a big shot. But the thing is, Jon Jones is not known for his power. He's not known to be able to knock opponents out with a punch or something like that. He could potentially find a head kick or some kind of elbow. But the fighters that Alistair Overeem struggled against the most were fighters who had a lot of power and also granite chins, like TRT Bigfoot Silva, Travis Brown in his prime, Ben Rothwell. All these guys hit very hard and also had granite chins. Jones has a very good chin, but he doesn't have near the kind of power that those fighters had. In each one of those fights, Alistair Overeem was winning most of those exchanges. He was beating Bigfoot. He was beating Travis Brown. He almost finished Brown. He was winning exchanges against Ben Rothwell, which was a very short fight. Ben Rothwell landed an uppercut that rocked him and then eventually knocked him out with an overhand. But those fights were a lot wilder. They were a lot more chaotic than what a Jones fight would look like. Alistair Overeem versus Jon Jones would be a lot more technical, a lot more of a chess match, and those are the kind of fights that Alistair Overeem excels at. He was a technical heavyweight striker who had so much power. He would have been a fighter that would have beaten Jon Jones. Then we go to Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is a fighter that can fight Jon Jones. Aspinall is faster than Jones. He's bigger. He hits harder. He has better boxing. He has good wrestling. He has good jiu-jitsu. He's a well-rounded heavyweight with also some of the best footwork out of anyone Jones has ever fought before. I mean, you look at him, you look at Gustafsson, you look at Dominick Reyes, all these fighters had fantastic footwork, but Aspinall is way bigger than those two guys, who also hits way harder than them. He has a great chin, ate a big shot from Sergey Pavlovich. That's the main thing about Tom Aspinall. He has the speed with the size and the power and being well-rounded. He is a heavyweight that can beat Jon Jones. I think I would give it like a 55-45 in Tom Aspinall's favor to win the fight. If he had a chin like Tom Aspinall or like Gustafsson, he would be number one, 100%. But we go to number two, somewhat related to Daniel Cormier, Cain Velasquez in his prime. Would have been a very tough fight for Jon Jones. Maybe the matchup is not as good stylistically for Cain as Alistair would be, but he had a great chin, insane cardio, well-rounded, fantastic wrestling, very hard to take this guy to the ground. Even Brock Lesnar had a hard time wrestling with Cain, while also being like 30 to 40 pounds bigger, non-stop pressure. The only thing that could be difficult for Cain are Jon Jones moving away with his lead arm extended and just throwing out kicks. But Cain would never allow Jones to settle. He would never allow Jones to just get back to the center of the cage. He'd be cutting him off, constant pressure. He would take a few shots to get in close and then start lasering him with swift punching combinations. He was bigger, just as fast, more powerful, and more athletic than Daniel Cormier, while also having comparable wrestling skills. They wrestle a little bit differently. I think Velasquez could probably take Jon Jones down once or twice in the fight, but that wouldn't be the way he would win the fight. He would use his wrestling to get in close, just like he did against various different opponents, like Junior Dos Santos, who was constantly moving around in the cage. Cain uses wrestling and landed big shots in close. I think Cain Velasquez would have been a fighter that would have beaten Jon Jones. And then the number one hardest fight for Jon Jones, a fighter I've been talking about for years that would beat Jones, Francis Ngannou. There is no fighter who's too durable for Francis in knockout. He had an 83-inch reach, one-punch knockout power, by far the hardest hitter Jones could ever have fought. Wrestling getting better, stronger, bigger, athletic, decent footwork. Jones' usual defense would not work on Francis. He can't just hold his hands out and get away from Francis's punches. He'd still be in range. The leg kicks would be devastating, and so physically strong strong in the clinch. Even Alistair Overeem was completely overpowered. I think Francis Ngannou would have been the fighter to knock Jon Jones out. Because think about Jon Jones, he has a very good chin, so he might be able to take a few clean shots for Francis, but the reason why a lot of fighters, when they land a shot on Jones and they don't hurt him that much, is because he's always moving away from punches with that reach. It's hard to land clean with a lot of those shots, right? One fighter that caught him clean and actually rocked him was Lyoto Machida, where he didn't use his reach in that moment. He just got hit clean by Lyoto's left hand. His defense against all these fighters was so successful in not getting hit clean, but that doesn't work against Ngannou. Their reach are pretty much the same, which would be the first time for Jones. Usually fighters would have to get on the inside. They would have to create angles with their footwork and get in close that way, such as Dominick Reyes, right? Ngannou would not need to do that. Ngannou could punch Jones no matter how far Jones reaches forward. And in that kind of fight, Jones would have to use a lot more head movement. If you ever seen the way Jones moves his head, like in the Dominick Reyes fight, where because Reyes was getting past the reach, Jones had to rely on head movement. He doesn't have his eyes on his opponent most of the time. And if he's not seeing the punches from Francis, he could get easily knocked out. So I think Francis could stop the takedowns. A few leg kicks and Jones' entire movement is going to be compromised. I mean, Ngannou has insanely powerful leg kicks, and Jones' striking defense is not enough to get away from Ngannou's punches. So those are the 8 fighters, in my opinion, that would have had a shot at beating Jones. Of course, we would never know because he didn't fight most of these guys, right? He fought Stipe, who was much older. He fought Gus and Reyes, who arguably beat him. And he fought Cormier in the light heavyweight division. I think he still would have won at heavyweight, but I think it would have been a way closer fight. And the thing is, Jones had the opportunity to fight all of these fighters, every single one of them. He had the opportunity to fight Francis Ngannou, but the negotiations kind of did away with that. He could have fought Cain Velasquez back in the day, but wasn't ready for heavyweight, even though he said he was going to do it since like 2015. He can fight Tom Aspinall right now, but it seems like he doesn't want to. He could have fought Alistair Overeem. Alistair even talked about it before, but again, Jones wasn't ready for heavyweight. He could have fought prime Stipe, but said that Stipe wasn't enough of a draw. And some people might say, where's Fedor? Or, where's certain other fighters? I was thinking about Fedor, but he could have posed some issues for Jon Jones, but overall, I don't think he would have beaten Jones. So in my opinion, those are the fighters I think that could have beaten Jon Jones. I know Jones is looking like the unstoppable fighter, and, nobody even wants to think about any fighter that could have beaten him, but Jones is not unstoppable. We've seen him get beaten by 2 fighters already, and we've seen him lose multiple rounds, right? Even losing a round to old Stipe. Nearly lost the fight to Thiago Santos, whose knees were completely torn in the fight. He got beaten by Dominick Reyes. He got beaten by Alexander Gustafsson. He lost rounds to Daniel Cormier. This is by no stretch of the imagination an unstoppable fighter that can lose to no one. He's not looking like Mike Tyson in his prime or anything like that.